After being betrayed for being too strong and ending up becoming a threat, the best spearman in the entire continent goes back to the past, this time ready to take on extras and people. Before the video starts, I wanted to thank you. Thank you very much for the 400 subscribers, man. You are too insane and you are helping the channel a lot. Thank you very much, and let's go. Let's not stop here. Our goal continues. You are giving this gigantic morale. I'm posting more and more, and our goal is to try to reach 50,000 subscribers. And after that, only the sky is the limit. Thank you very much to everyone who is coming here, liking, sharing and commenting here on the channel, man. You are incredible and you are giving huge morale, so don't forget, leave a like and subscribe for even more videos like this here on the channel. And without further ado, let's get to the content. Then it is contextualized that Joshua, after regressing, came across the Igrand continent, apparently at peace. However, some conspiracies began to emerge, putting local peace at risk, and the continent is made up of 3 empires that are considered 3 superpowers, one of which is the Avalon Empire of Emperor Marcos, who secretly joined forces with Drax Bel Grace, a Soa knight who for its turn is also one of the 3 superpowers, in that Marcos and Drag ended up causing enmity with Soa's subordinate country, which in this case is the Trans Kingdom, and their objective with all this was to start a war. However, the Emperor Verona discovered their plan, and in addition to predicting war against Tran, he also prevented Avalon from taking a step forward for war to happen between the Emperor and the Vatican began with the aim of electing a new pope, and 5 years after that Joshua becomes Baron and commander of the 11th and 12th Battalion, in which he goes to the First Prince's palace to celebrate his birthday. And while he arrives at the palace, a woman watches everything from afar, saying that she only has one chance. So as for Lady Sherry, Yukam subordinate, and says that it is in these important events that she must maintain her composure to keep her family's honor intact. I hear this, she explains to the Cox, who doesn't intend to act ugly in front of the Cromwell family. Cox gets even more excited, and Amanda takes advantage of this cue to get more attention from the First Prince, and as they go further, Guag notices Sherry's presence and says he is surprised to see her, but besides, he takes the opportunity to poke her and says that she shouldn't be there having fun. After all, her family is on the verge of ruin. Natasha asks if she even received an invitation from the palace, and Cox starts to worry about having found them and watching, but to his lady he states that he is also irritated by these matters. But Sherry recovers herself and greets the arrogant nobles politely, and then she leaves them behind, saying that she needs to meet someone in the palace. But first Gug asks the knight find out her identity. After all, his father had asked him to reinforce the castle's security that night. The knight asks Sherry to give him a document that confirms her identity, and hearing this, Cox loses his patience and says that Sherry belongs to one of the 5 families, Duchess of Avalon, therefore a simple imperial knight cannot meddle in the affairs of families. That said, he orders them to get out of the way immediately, but Gug continues to provoke them and states that no one is waiting for a family which is on the verge of ruin. Furthermore, he suggests that Sherry leave so as not to ruin the prince's birthday. After all, this is an important event that only occurs once a year. That said, the girl even more so, and deduces that they have nowhere to go because Sherry's house was reduced to ashes because of the Cromwell family. Then Gug notices that they are actually there to beg for their lives as a last resort for survival. Defense of Pontier family, and explains that they received official authorization to be there, so they must get out of the way. Gug asks who is that man, and he says that he is Joshua, the commander of the external battalion, saying that he orders everyone to return to their posts because he will take care of that matter. However, the knights are afraid to obey him. After all, they need to hear Joe's side in this. Joshua just stares at him coldly. Joshua is willing to accompany Sherry to the palace, but Gug insists on being insufferable and deduces that Joshua has been trying to bring the family to the palace for years, but he claims that Joshua will not be able to defeat his barbarian mercenary king. While the boy puts on his little show, Natasha remembers that Joshua is still the same as usual, so he will just ignore him in this. The tantrum boy totally and states that he will send Joshua to hell soon. In the meantime, Shelley recognizes Joshua and says that he is very different from before, but he doesn't care much about her talk and tells him to follow his way from now on. But before he leaves the place completely, she invites him to dance at the ball, but he refuses because he needs to worry about protecting the castle. After all, now he is a member of the Baroness Sanders family. That being said, he follows his path and comments to himself that Sherry also needs to get her life in order, because if Barbarian is not defeated, Duke Pontier will lose all his property to the Crumbell family. And even with him watching all this happen, Joshua states that it is not yet time to intervene. After all, he still needs to take care of many things, so Joshua sends a spy to appear, and she arrives in ignorance and asks how the boy was able to detect the energy of true death, and Joshua just tells Aisha to give up the idea of killing the first prince, and hearing this she is amazed as no human should know his name, and tells Joshua he activates his dragon fear energy, and then she kneels down in salute to the master of the great sister and says that she didn't consider Joshua to be the Black Master, but he says he will forgive her for her insolence, but says again that she should forget the idea of killing the first prince. So Aisha decides to obey, and Joshua advises her to leave Arcadia. After all, the Black Wind will hunt him down after discovering that she failed to assassinate her target, but hearing this she tries to insist on staying there. But Joshua threatens to punish all the dark elves if she disobeys him in this. Aisha chooses to obey him, so Joshua comments to himself even about her innocence. After all, she really believed he was the black dragon that said. He informs her that she will become the murderous queen, and in the past life she failed to kill the first prince, and as a result of this Aisha is punished with an incurable scar. However, Joshua decides to intervene beforehand so that she doesn't have this stain on her career. So he states that they will still meet at some point, and as she leaves the place Aisha is in disbelief at having seen the black dragon, and with that she believes that the black wind itself would also not suspect that she would find him there. Aisha remembers that she will practically become a fugitive, but she decides to take advantage of the time she will have free. Meanwhile, in the palace, the nobles make small talk, and upon noticing Shelley's presence, one of them comments that the Pontier family was going through financial difficulties, so he finds it strange that the girl is there because rebuilding the Pontier family must be very expensive. After all, they fought against the Cromwell family. Having said this, he deduces that no family will support the Pontiers now, and in the middle of all this Prince Kisser Ser von Britain finally appears, and soon he thanks everyone for attending the event, and one of the maids checks the list and comments to Sir Zaren that the name Joshua Sanders is not on that list. The princess notices that even though she can't forget the boy, and upon hearing this the prince notes it in a whisper, but Cezanne doesn't talk, and he notices that he was too worried because he thought his sister was nervous about the event. And when looking around, Kisser notices Sherry in the middle of the crowd and says he is happy with her presence at his party, so she greets him formally, but the prince asks her to be more comfortable. After all, he is still not used to this rigid greeting. Said this is what he comments on about the sad situation of her family, and to make her forget about it for a while she invites her to dance with him. Well, my family is all dying, but dancing with you will make me feel lighter. In that, Sherry, the situation is strange. After all, just the most brilliant ladies should have the right to dance with the prince, and before taking his hand Sherry notes that she will be the target of envy of all the nobles around, and for her this would be a very bad thing, as creating enemies there would only make it difficult for her fights against Cromwell. And then she refuses to dance with the prince, and Kisser is confused by the whole situation and asks why she is refusing. Joshua goes to him and informs him that she already has a dance partner, which in this case is the man himself who said that. He greets the prince, and Caesar notes that that young man is Joshua. One of the nobles informs that this young man is the star of the empire because he completely changed the imperial battalion in just 5 years, and when remembering Joshua's roots she states that he belongs to the Agnos family, which in turn she is friendly with the Pontier family, in that she understands why Sherry is right there with her family, running in danger, because her objective would be to ask for Joshua's help. Meanwhile, Joshua talks to the prince and explains again that he has already arranged with the lady Sherry of dance with. She then asks if she really made plans with Joshua and to get rid of that situation. She says yes, and in the middle of all this Gug goes to them again to piss off and says that Joshua is having a very arrogant attitude towards the said prince. He apologizes for interfering so suddenly, but states that the young baron's attitudes are wrong, and that Joshua confronts him and says that he should learn from his own advice not to be delicate. And as for the other nobles, they agree with Joshua. After all, if the prince continued to want to dance with Sherry, he would be stealing it using his position. Joshua tells Gug to leave things as they are. Once again, however, if things continue like this, Joshua will make Gug go through the same experience as that day, and, upon noticing the weather warming up, Kisser decides to calm things down and says that the objective of that event is to make everyone have fun. Then Joshua apologizes to the prince and says that he wouldn't have asked Sherry to dance if he had known that he intended to do it as well. But Kisser shows his understanding to them and says that he was almost rude to both of them because he didn't know that they had already planned to dancing. With that said, he asks Sherry to give him a chance at the next dance, so Joshua takes him to the dance, and Sherry states that she will feel indebted to him for the rest of the day. After all, he got himself into something that could give him headaches later. However, Joshua states that he wants to reward her because he forgot the promise they had made 5 years ago. When I hear this, Sherry gets really upset because she thought he had forgotten the promise, and even starts to wonder if he doesn't know what it means receiving a family symbol from a lady. She tries to ask him for help, but Yoshu cuts him off, saying he can't do anything now as he is part of the Imperial Knights family. She tries to talk him out of it and says she would just talk about how he grew up. And meanwhile, Ken, who is the former Cain, remembers all the time he spent getting beaten by that demon who is Joshua's father and gets angry about it. After all, his master is calmly enjoying a ball at the Imperial Palace, and so he tries to enter the palace, but he is blocked by one of the guards who confuses the boy with anyone else, and to validate his identity Ken presents his Agnos family coat of arms, saying that he is a knight of the Agnes family and is from the Baroness Sanders family. And then, at the end of the dance, everyone applauds them and say they are the most beautiful pair in all of Avalon, but the two envious people keep biting each other with their happiness, and Gug starts swearing at them, saying that they won't be happy like that for so long. Then Sherry starts to thank Joshua, completely red, and then runs away like a maiden in love, and the only thing he can say is that she is patient as always. So Caesar goes to Joshua asking if he is the same one she found 5 years ago behind the wall, and with that he starts talking to the girl for telepathy, saying that he will visit the Flower Palace Bride of Fire soon, and he tells her that the medicine that can cure her illness is almost ready, and then he starts to walk away, but she asks him to wait, asking what medicine was that, and she shouts for Baron Sanders, and he thinks to himself that it's his way of paying for the bond from a past life, and he asks her to stay safe until then. And at the academy all the students are completely nervous because their boss will arrive soon, so it ends up arriving and everyone gets in line, and then Icarus appears. You're not going to tell me that this is a man, because if it's a man, he's the man of my life, and everyone gets in line as if they were. Then they bow so that Icarus passes by them, and after a moment of tension they all bow, congratulating him on his early graduation. But then he starts to say that he asked them not to do something like that so that people wouldn't misunderstand, but one of the students asks how they wouldn't do that because he is the benefactor who brought a change revolutionary for the academy. He starts to feel embarrassed, so the boy asks if they can at least do this as the last tribute to his brother, and then the boy asks where he is going now. Icarus says he is going to a destination he already decided on a while ago, good weather. He's going to find another son. Well, I'm sorry, but this isn't a man, isn't he? So in another place, Joshua starts to sneeze when Icarus talks about him, and then there's a murmur from the guards asking how someone got in there. They say that outsiders are not allowed in that place, but the person in question asks them to get out of the way as he knows the battalion commander there, but the guard tells him to just wait in the lobby as this is not a place where strangers can enter freely. But Cain says he stayed in hell waiting for 5 years. He is completely nervous, so Joshua goes to him recognizing the boy and says he thought about going to see him later, but he is moved that he went on his own, and seeing him Cain starts shouting at him, calling him a shitty lord and asking how he dare enjoy so much luxury in the imperial palace after throwing his most precious servant literally into the hand of a demon, and he says that he swung his sword again and again until his hands almost think about giving up everything for Joshua, and the boy can only apologize, but Cain tells him to forget it and is happy that he at least understands, so Joshua changes the subject saying that since he went to find him he must have achieved that internship. Then Ken starts bragging saying that he doesn't even need to worry because now he's strong enough to not lose against anyone other than Joshua, and Joshua starts to wonder what happened to him in 5 years for the boy's personality to change so much, so he starts to consider going back to acting alone as planned. While they are in this chat, another man comes telling Joshua that someone else appeared for Liv, and he is scared because 2 people appeared on the same day and outside the Grift of Good waits for he, and when he arrives he is impressed that this is Icarus, and so is Cain, so the boy asks if Joshua had already forgotten his face and says that it is making him sad, and Kenny in turn begins to think that it is an incomparable beauty. He begins to say that he either saw a lot of things about Icarus, like he graduated from the academy with the highest grades in history, and that he is a prodigy strategist who turned down offers to help well-known families and even the imperial palace. But Kenny says he didn't think that this person would be such a beautiful lady, so the cattle asks for the chance to accompany him, but Icarus starts asking him not to call her lady, so he says that he is the first knight of Baron Joshua Sanders Cain, and even says that Icarus can call him by his nickname whoever wants it, but Icarus's face says everything about what he's thinking about this, and then Joshua asks Kenny to stop because Icarus is getting scared. And then the boy asks if he finally remembered him, and also asks if he didn't forget his promise because the PR asked him to prove his worth at the academy, and the boy kept his promise, and he says that now it's Baron Joshua's turn to fulfill his, and Icarus asks if he will accept him, and Joshua in turn just gives a smiling, asking how he could forget, and says that he was already planning to meet him in person if he hadn't shown up because he can't leave the strategist position vacant any longer. He even says that Icarus is the only one who can fill it, and so the two make one. So Kinho and Icarus tell him that as always he says the most shameful things possible so carelessly, but Cain starts to ask how long they would stay in this little world, leaving him out, so he puts his hand in theirs and says he will be in the care of the Lord Great Strategist. Icarus assumes that Great Strategist is not a bad title, and with that Joshua calls them to discuss his plan straight away, and he says that he will summarize. He wants to go see your majesty and then go to Reinhardt's in the however he tells the two that they will need to go to the Pontier family in their place, and the two are incredulous because they would have to go to the Pontier family soon. And then in the great imperial palace the emperor looks like he has few friends, so he begins by stating that he is speechless because how can there not be a single person wanting to participate in the master battle of Avalon in this empire, which is the empire of the knights. So he asks them to imagine the joke they would become for the other nations that they fear, and Marco states that he cannot let this happen no matter what because the absolute nation of this continent must only be Avalon. So he asks what Arden thinks about this, and he asks how much Avalon's status will fall if they abandon the opportunity to prove who is the absolute greatest being in the Reinhardt's master battle. And when Arden was about to respond, someone shouts that he will make the majesty of the Avalon Empire known, so everyone looks at who it is, and Joshua arrives in the hall saying that he will participate in the master battle. Then Marcos begins praising the boy's position as commander of the external battalion, and then the boy formally salutes the emperor and he asks if he didn't hear wrong, but Joshua confirms that he will represent endorsement and participate in the master battle, but the emperor says that the master battle held in Harlan will not, it's a common tournament, so he asks how old the boy is and the boy replies that he is 15. And the emperor says that a battle master at 15 is something that is not so common, but he knows very well that common sense does not apply to him. So in front of everyone there he must prove that he has the qualifications to participate in this battle, and Hisoka 2.0 starts to bite himself, saying that he would love to have a taste of his growth directly, and he still thinks to himself that this could be his chance, but when he notices Arden is already looking directly at his face, he can only tuck his tail between his legs, asking why he is protecting Joshua, even when he was the one who kicked him out of his family. But the boy says that before proving his skills he has a condition, and says that he will participate in the master battle if the emperor accepts, and even the emperor is surprised by this, and everyone around starts to say that this is insolence because he is very bold in asking his majesty for a condition, and they all start to order the boy to train his modesty a little to know his place, but in this the emperor tells everyone to be quiet. They obviously obey immediately, and then Marcos orders him to speak as he will give him whatever he wants as long as it is not about leaving the Imperial Knights, but Joshua realizes that he was right in what he was going to ask for, and then the emperor asks if he wants to leave the Imperial Knights and says that he is his property and cannot leave his hands, but Joshua tries to argue, saying that whoever entered the bloody battle of Bircher can leave whenever he wants, but Marcos raises his voice and says that he is there in Avalon, and in that the two face each other eye to eye, and then the emperor retreats, saying that he will also propose a condition, and the boy soon asks what condition it would be, but the emperor says that before that he says this while attacking the boy. Then a gigantic explosion occurs in that hall and debris flies everywhere, leaving the entire place completely destroyed, and when the people who were there look up they see Emperor Josa exchanging blows with weapons made of mana, and when he sees that the boy managed to stop his attack he retreats and tells Arden that he has never been jealous of him in his life, but he says that for the first time he thinks that envy is a thing, and then the emperor reveals that he just wanted to check if he had the aura blade, but on thinking that he had already reached the sword mind he says that this means he has already reached the master realm, so the emperor sits down saying he doesn't think he can continue acting like a child after that, and he tells Joshua to do as he wants because if he comes back with satisfactory results he swears on his name that he will listen to his request, and Joshua states that he will make sure to exceed his expectations, and already with Sherry they knock on her door getting in the way their work, but they say that the girl has a visitor and she in turn allows them to enter, and then Kane and Ikaros arrive there and they greet her with all the grace possible, and Ikaros introduces himself as a member of the Ravert, one of the southern states, just like Pontier, and her asks if this is really true and asks what the person considered the most intelligent on the continent is doing there, and Sherry is completely modest, saying that she should be honored because I always wanted to meet him, but while she is talking about this she sees the coat of arms of Duke Agnos and begins to say that he understood everything because it was the Duke who sent him, knowing his circumstances, but Kane corrects the girls saying that that was not what they would have come to her aid in the name of Baron Joshua who ordered him to help her, and they say that they are there only for the desire of their lord, and Sherry is completely disbelieved by what she is hearing. While Joshua was wanting to leave the palace without raising so many suspicions, Agnes goes to him saying that he hasn't visited him in the last 5 years and now he's trying leave without talking to anyone, and he asks if Joshua holds a grudge against him for choosing Babel as his successor instead of the boy, and Joshua says that he does hold a grudge but not because of the succession, and he also says that it was actually a good choice as he had know how someone like him who abandoned the Agnos family name without even hesitating ends up becoming the family successor, and he states that he certainly can't hold a grudge against his father because of that, and Agnos asks why he holds a grudge, and Joshua reveals that it's because treat him and his mother as if they didn't exist even though they had enough power, but when Agnos was about to say it was for the family he looks at the boy's face, and Joshua says he no longer holds a grudge for that because it's been a long time since he's seen his mother look so happy, and in that he bows to Agnos giving his sincere thanks for teaching his knight and for taking care of his mother, and in that Agnos says that he who should be grateful, but in the middle of this paternal moment his soldiers start to go to him asking his commander was really going to leave. They ask why he's trying to leave, and when Agnos sees that his knights are coming he simply puts his foot down, and then everyone arrives asking why he's trying to leave without saying anything, and they also ask if he's going to abandon his subordinates from the 11th and of the 12th battalion, but Joshua tells them that they must have gotten confused, after all he never thought of them as his subordinates, and that they are in shock, but the boy says he would answer without even thinking if they asked if they were one of the because he always had them as his precious comrades, and they start laughing because he is always scaring people, so Joshua says that he is leaving there for personal matters, and then he asks everyone to come back soon, but even then Bison goes to him asking if he will stop them from proceeding to help with this matter, and he says by watching him for the last 5 years he ended up noticing that he has a reason for leaving a matter that could put them all in danger, and then he confirms that that's why Joshua is wanting to leave alone, but the boy simply says thank you to him, and then they all understand and say that they will always be there, not as subordinates but as their comrades, so they won't say goodbye, they will wait as long as they need, and then they ask please for the boy to come back and make them shine again, and then everyone raises their swords paying respect to their commander, and so Joshua passes through them all thinking to himself that he has completed almost all of his objectives in the palace. Imperial. Taking 1, he says he managed to become a battalion commander and entered the secret warehouse that every commander can only enter once a year, and thus he managed to recover the obsidian earrings, his beloved weapon from his past life. And in the middle of this whole process he ended up earning a title in the name Sanders. Outside that he also found the murderous queen and prevented her injury in the past, so that he also managed to form his force with those he can call his people inside the imperial palace. But the most important thing is Kaiser von Breton, because he planned to destroy all the foundations that he polished during his stay in the imperial palace, but Joshua ended up failing, but in the process he discovered about the third power that is protecting Kaiser, something that Joshua did not know in his past life as he was. It's really strange that the powerless fourth prince became the emperor with just willpower, and Joshua gets angry thinking that he was exposing himself behind enemy lines in the past, and he says that since the lunar door is in Reinhardt he needs to learn all the information that has changed as quickly as possible. After all, a threat he doesn't know about may be hiding in the shadows, and in the cathedral of the Rubald Empire Christian says a prayer when he is interrupted, and his master goes there saying that he heard that he's going to leave soon, and the boy confirms that he's going to leave, so his master asks him to be careful, but he says he's sure that no one from the 9 stars or the 12 superhumans would be able to scratch the boy, so the boy thanks him for his teachings, because it is thanks to this that he has this protection. But even so he tells the boy to be careful if he meets the Knight of Providence, the Urals, and the boy asks if he is referring to the current king of the Trum Principality, and Jean says yes, because he has a special power and he is someone that the magic tower is keeping an eye on. But the boy asks his master not to worry, as he has no intention of getting involved in matters between the Swallow Empire and the Trum Principality. And with that his master says that everything is great, and he talks about the Battle of M that will be held in Reinhardt, and then says he will prepare a carriage for the boy, but he says he doesn't need it as he was thinking of visiting the border before going to Reinhardt, and his master asks if he is talking about the border of Avalon territory, and the boy says yes, but he knows it is dangerous, but he needs to go. After all, there are rumors that a Lith appeared there. Even though the battle is important, he has the duty to go and confirm the rumors as a knight who serves the god. Then your master stays surprised by the lead. Then it is explained to us that high-rank mages whose bodies have deteriorated with the flow of time but could not leave their connection with magical research, even in death they offer their souls and become undead due to black magic, so they become lights and undead, and skinny black people are considered public enemies of the continent regardless of nationality. And the boy says that this information does not come from anyone other than Harold, and he believes that this information has high credibility. And then Jean asks where he is, and the boy says he is already on the eastern border of Avalon, the Trifer district. While preparing the cavalry, Icaros decides to help Cain with his work, but the knight dismisses his help, saying he is capable of doing everything himself, that he has been possessed by a demon of lust. And in the middle of the conversation, Lady Sherry interrupts them to inform about the arrival of the Cromwell family at the tower, which, to make matters worse, they cannot use the teleportation portal, so the Pontier family will have to cross the mountain directly. There is no portal capable of connecting Reinhardt to Arcad, however he is willing to teleport the boy to Ibri Castle, as this is the closest place he can go to Reinhardt. And while listening to Mr. Joshua he notices him looking at his face a lot. In this he asks if there is something wrong, then the gentleman says that Joshua reminds him of a very talented young wizard, and hearing this Joshua shows interest in knowing more about this subject, in which the gentleman informs him that this wizard was also a prodigy in an area of magic, but something very unfortunate happened to him, and to get some clue as to what happened, the magic tower will participate in the Reinhardt Masters battle. That said, you note that he ended up talking too much, so he decides to just teleport Joshua to his destination, but before he does it, informs him that he will feel a little nauseous due to the distance that the Ibri Castle is, and after informing him sir, finally the brother walks to the place, and when he gets there Joshua is thoughtful about the magic tower, still looking for Jack stirrups, but he notices it makes sense that they have this in mind. After all, Bronto disappeared with Jack, and suddenly Joshua is surprised by Count Ibri. He informs that he received orders to go and see Joshua in person. After all, the Majesty of the Kingdom issued an imperial order for the families welcome Joshua with ample hospitality. After all, the boy is the absolute pride of the empire. I hear this Joseph feels that his steps are being very well observed and analyzed, so this is not good for him, in that Ibri calls him for them to enter the castle, but Joshua refuses his request politely and says that he needs to do something first, but Ibri informs that this is a direct request from the emperor and therefore they must follow him, so Joshua explains once again that he needs to leave quickly, but says that he will try to visit the castle one Another time, Ibri asks where he's going and Josh informs him that he's leaving for the mercenary guild. Meanwhile, the emperor's subordinate says his prayers but is soon interrupted by another man who appears to be surprised at the fact that he's returned to Marcos. After all, his plan in Swallow failed, and for him to have returned his services to the emperor, he certainly must have made a great deal with Marcos. In this man D2 that his plan is to end the Agnos family using Babel himself. After all, the Emperor Marcos will be able to advance and attack Swallow if Agnos lets him give up to oppose the war. That said, the man is willing to help him too if he needs it, but Marcos's subordinate states that he will not become this guy's servant. After all, he still has a little pride in his chest, although he abandoned his own country, and upon hearing this the man states that he doesn't want him as a servant but as a companion, so Marcos's subordinate just turns his back and reminds that man about his father is almost dying, but the guy states that he does not recognize his biological father as a father. After all, he is just a lunatic desperate for massacre and war. That being said, he reaffirms his proposal to Draxia Bell Grace. Then Marcos's subordinate states that this boy really is incredible. After all, he is barely out of diapers, and this person was actually Kaiser von Britain, and with that the meeting between the two people who led Joshua to death in his past life begins. Meanwhile, in the mercenary guild of Ibri, Joshua argues for a silver plate, but Aiden informs that to obtain this he will need to complete at least 100 2-star missions, and in addition he needs to get a bronze plate first. But Joshua remembers that there is a way to get the silver plate in a faster way, but Aiden explains that he can't give the plate to him that way because he doesn't know what Jay was going to do with her. The protagonist states that it doesn't make sense for him to ask her intentions before giving her the plaque, and besides, he gives his famous joke about being a prodigy with incredible talent, but Aiden says it again, who has not yet established trust with him. Joshua explains that his only desire is to offer his services as a mercenary to someone who is in need, so there is no additional reason for him to receive the plaque. Aiden notes that the boy really has good intentions, so he offers a mission so that Josa can receive his plaque, but it will be a 5-star mission that consists of transporting some medical supplies from one place to another, and he finds it strange that such an easy mission is framed like 5 stars, but he accepts, and Aiden informs him that his destiny is Tripia, and before Jasuha leaves he says that he will ask for a reward as soon as he returns. After all, that is a 5-star mission, so he wants to earn something worthy, and even in that early morning Cox notices Sherry apparently worried about something. About this she explains that the letter she received from her father reports that he passed out. After that Cox is very worried already. Icaros he suggests ending the camp. Thereafter all they must leave as quickly as possible to fill Duck Pontier's position as soon as possible. In this Kane notes that they will have to leave as soon as they stopped, so he says that this way his body won't rust, but Cox explains that even though the situation is urg, Sherry is too tired to keep walking. Furthermore, he informs that they will arrive at the Pontier property just by crossing a river, so they don't need to rush, but Sherry lightly touches his shoulder, thanking him for his concern, but she states that she is not tired, so Cox remembers that they have been walking without resting since they left Arcad, but Sherry explains that she doesn't want to be a nuisance to others. Kane says that she is not being a nuisance, after all he is just there following the orders of his master Joshua. So Icaros rushes back low, but suddenly the bird he was getting information from is hit, and Kane is then tied up and dragged up, and seeing this scene Sherry gets distracted, so the ninja goes to her back stealthily and Amanda follows him, but Icaros disperses the action, ninja hitting him with a rock. Then the boy takes Shelly's arm and takes her away from the enemy, but on the way the ninja comes to his senses and orders his partners to kill the rest of the targets while capturing Lady Sherry, but Kane frees himself from the ropes and leaves in defense of the two. The ninja notes that this knight is stronger than he expected, however he states that the knight will not be able to defeat them so easily if his only ability is to use mana in an uncontrolled way. But when I hear this, Kane explains that true, the explosion of his mana served to alert all his close partners that ninja who fall is a very smart and dangerous opponent, and so he orders his companions to switch to the blitz tactic in case they must kill the knight first. And in the meantime Joshua follows his work at the guild and soon gets insulted by one of the adventurers who tells him to bring the loot box even faster than that. Joshua regrets having accepted a group mission, and then one of the adventurers advises the bear not to be so rude to him. The beginner, after all, he may be capabilito use aura, but hearing this he states that it is not easy to use aura, therefore he believes that that boy is not capable of using it, and so he tells the newbie to stay close to them. After all, the mission can be very difficult for him, although it is a mission of 2 stars. But Joshua is confused by this because they had told him that it would be a 5-star mission, and suddenly they are surprised by a group of undead, in which Aiden notices that the thing is more serious than expected because Dent of the Dead there is a Dullahan, which in this case is an undead monster of high rank, and upon seeing the creature Joshua remembers that this monster appeared precisely at that time in his past life, so he gets excited excited and goes for it, but the wizard enters in front of them and finishes off all the monsters using his ice magic, and then Ursa states that the magic that was used by the wizard is a 4th-class magic, and Joshua begins to think to himself that Avalon is an empire of knights that tends to disrespect wizards, and he says that any wizard above from the 2nd circle it is very rare to find, and that being the case there is only one wizard who could use a 4th-class magic in the Trifan district, and he recognizes this person as Archmage of Ice and Iceland Jin Rebrika. And soon after launch her new freezing magic, all the monsters are frozen, but the Dullahan starts to move, and then the leader of the mercenaries asks her to get back, and then he uses his English so equipment and fires a so that manages to defeat the monster, and at this point everyone goes crazy saying that they already expected the manager Aiden would be able to do it, and Joshua thinks to himself that he has heard rumors about his power, but in person it is really impressive, and he talks about the artifact embedded with invisibility magic, the English so of Abda, and he says that even in his past life that was the Mark Axler's favorite, the Rock, the one who was second in command of the group of 1 million mercenaries for decades, and was a very valuable weapon. And then he starts to wonder about the other artifact Amato Lifon, and he wonders if it existed at that time, and in that Iseline starts looking at his mouth, and then another man comes running saying that they are in trouble because an even bigger horde is coming, they will have to get out of there immediately. So they look, and there are several Dullahan coming towards them, and everyone is scared because they have never seen so many monsters gathered like that, and the problem is that no one there can fight him other than the manager Aiden, and they wonder why there are so many undead on a mission from 2 stars, and so they say that this is asking to die, and they start to retreat, but Aiden starts asking them to come back, but Joshua asks him if he really thinks they're going to come back, and then he says he's going to earn his share, and then asks him to make a point of paying him properly. So the boy already invokes Lukia and the Expendables. They realize that he is doing it again and going in front of danger, and they start to say that the boy really wants to die, but then his spear starts to exhale its rays, and he is full of confidence. So all the mountains move towards him, and he starts rocking her. Activating your magic spear art 4th form annihilation, and a huge beam goes towards the monsters, wiping them all from Joshua's face, and everyone is amazed at what they are seeing. After all the Dullahan are gone and only the boy is standing, and they have never seen this ability before. They start wondering if this would be a unique ability, and they ask what renowned family the boy is from. Aiden says that among the Agnos family's techniques he has never seen one with such a destructive capacity, especially in an area outside of which he never found out about a spear technique, and Joshua says what he always says in these situations, and says that Aiden shouldn't think too much otherwise he'll just get hurt. And then already in the tent he starts asking what kind of supply mission this is, and Aiden opens the game saying that he only put this mission as an escort because the client asked for it, and Joshua realizes that they asked to reduce the difficulty. He asks what would happen if someone died in the appearance of the Dullahans, but Aiden says that honestly the Dullahan were unexpected, and he says that he thought he could defeat common monsters and complete the mission quickly, and that's why he reduced the difficulty. And Joshua thinks to himself that things like this are common in the world of mercenaries, so he asks what is the last monster they will have to kill, and Aiden says that in Heb, the small town where the castle is located, they will need to kill a lith that appeared there, and thinking about the lith that appeared in Heb, he connects this to Iseline, and about this he thinks a little and starts to smile, saying that it looks like he is going to win another of things he wants after finishing this mission. And then the boy gets excited saying to go kill him right now, and asks why they are camping, and then he says that Heb is off limits at the moment and getting an entry permit will take some time. Then he questions why they are doing all this because of a milk, but Aiden says it's not because of a milk, there is a territorial war going on at the Rebrika property, so the imperial family is regulating entry with identity confirmations. And Joshua surprised by this information, but out of nowhere, and he goes in there saying that it's not a territorial war, it's just a massacre by Marquez Cronwell, who still in the forest. The two continue running. Icaros, he asks her not to be captured and tells Sherry to just focus on getting out of there, but she is reluctant and says that up front there is AD, that if they cross the river they will arrive at the Pontier property, and then they need to hurry and run away. But Cox is not at all happy with what he sees, and she asks where is the boat, but he says the dock was destroyed. Then the ninja says that there is only one way for the four of them to get out of there, and that would be to die, and then he goes for it in an attack and ends up hitting someone, and when the ninja prepares his attack against Cherry he is hit by a sudden arrow, and Cox wonders where would that attack have come from. Then Troy's friend appears and states that they would be in the worst house if he had arrived a second late. That being said, he is willing to listen to them from there, so they continue on their journey, and upon arriving at their destination, Troy notices that it's missing people around the place. The guy explains to him that everyone was summoned by Baron Arna, and hearing this, Troy is surprised and plans to go to the Baron to keep up to date with the new information. While the guy notices that Lady Sherry is also there and says he is happy to see her and Coke safe, but she shows concern for all her friends who were left behind in this. Icarus reassures him and states that she doesn't need to worry about Kane, after all he is Baron Joshua's first knight, and that makes a difficult person to kill. What Troy says, he says who will go to the meeting room and asks Sherry to stay there, but she says she will go too. He asks if she is sure about that and advises the girl not to try so hard, but Shell explains that her situation does not allow her to give the luxury of relaxing after all. Her father is collapsing and so she must assume his position as Lord. Meanwhile, one of the men at the meeting tells Arna that they must give up their positions, and Arna in turn explains that they will not be able to keep each of put in this. His partner suggests that they at least keep the production base protected, and suddenly Troy appears in the middle of the meeting and asks about Marquez Cronwell having started to act again in this. Sherry he tells him that he will also participate in that meeting and asks him to they report all the details to her, but Arna explains that they are in the middle of a military meeting so he can only report later, and furthermore he says that it is too early for her to join them, but Sherry insists and says that you can make your report now. And this guy next door, he reports that in addition to starting to attack the caravans managed by them, the Rumbell family also started attacking his clients to make the situation even worse. They also closed the route that brought supplies to their property, and because of this he fears that the entire population will end up dying due to lack of food. And when staying up to date with all the details, Shell notices that things are more serious than she imagined, because if things continue at this pace they will left with nothing, although the only solution is to fight back. She states that this is not within their reach at the moment. Sherry asks for some advice to help her resolve the situation. Ikaros asks if it would be possible to produce food within their property, and before answering this, Arna asks who he is. Then Count Troy enters in the middle of the conversation. He informs that this boy helped Miss Sherry to escape from Arcad and get there to safety, but Hannah still thinks it's very rude for an outsider to participate in the meeting of him. However, Sherry says that Icaro graduated first in the academy room, and in addition he proposed to help the Pontier house in this crisis, and hearing this, Arna is left without understanding anything because he doesn't see anything so special in a person who has just to graduate from the academy. And furthermore, Arna states that the boy is nothing more than a simple outsider, therefore he does not feel comfortable passing on information about his family to a stranger. This explains that they cannot pay attention to trivial things now since the Lord is in bed, and so he asks Sherry and Icarus to leave that meeting. And hear this, Cox is indignant at Arna and states that Sherry has been looking for allies all this time willing to help her with the situation at Casa Pontier, but Arna continues maintaining her opinion and states that efforts like this will not help anything. After all, Sherry only brought with her a boy who barely seems to have any experience in war. Cox states that the important thing at the moment is to find as many allies as possible, but Arna continues to think that Hieros is a waste of money, time, because their family is on the verge of the collapse, so they can't waste time arguing with people who won't help with anything. And besides, Arna reminds Sherry that she has never been to a meeting before, so her presence there is just making everything more chaotic. That said, he refuses to take orders from her for considering her incompetent, and in the midst of this confusion Icarus decides to gain Arna's trust by showing results. So he tells the Baron that he understands his feeling because really useless efforts are a loss of time. However, states that this same phrase does not apply to war. After all, if they are defeated they will lose everything. In this, Arna notes that the boy at least has a logical line of thought, so Ikaros says that Sherry deserves to be praised because she was able to recruit an excellent ally, who in this case is himself. And upon hearing this, Arna goes back on saying that the boy knew how to think and says that Icarus once again acted like a normal child, but the boy states that on that property there is a way to produce enough food to feeding 70% of the population. Icaros says that if he doesn't care about people and maintains the defense of property while focusing only on military supplies for the soldiers, they won't last as long. And upon hearing this, Sherry begins to understand him a little more. In this, Icaros deduces that the Cromwell family does not want this war to extend any longer than necessary. After all, this would only result in large financial losses. The boy suggests that the Cromwell family is thinking of a strategy that would make them unable to resist. Therefore, Icaros believes that the enemy will only suggest a single battle to end everything soon. And listening to Icaros' theory, Arna does not buy it because the Cromwell family will not be sure of victory because the results of this strategy are unpredictable and can generate several losses to the Crumble family. But as soon as he says this, he is contradicted by a soldier who goes to the meeting to inform them that the forces of the Crumble house are out there prepared for battle, and Troy states that Icarus was right all along in his prediction. And the boy in turn explains that if they accept to enter the battle, House Crumble will have the advantage because they have the power to decimate them. So Troy asks what advantage the enemy will gain if they position their forces in that location. After all, the Canyon Aden is a natural fortress. This makes it the best place for them to focus their plans, but Icarus says that the enemy has another plan, and that plan involves the River Dan. After all, House Cromwell is currently using a distraction tactic with them. And listening to Icarus' theory, Troy notices that it makes a lot of sense and says that they will have a chance if the enemy would really be thinking that way. That being said, he asks the boy how he came to that conclusion, but the guy next to him breaks the conversation and says that they should only worry about preparing the troops. Troy decides to return to his platoon to take care of the preparations and tells Arna that he is willing to follow Sherry's orders from now now on. So Count Troy asks everyone to gather at that place after preparations are completed, and when left alone with Ikaros she praises him. After all, the boy was able to silence the nobles and lead the meeting. She becomes more confident and says that things will work out now, receiving all these honors. Ikaros says that she must share her gratitude with his master. Also said this. He comments about there being a rumor that said both sides of the war were very similar at the beginning. So Ikaros asks if this is true, and Sherry answers yes and says that this equality changed after the mercenary king joined house crumble, because by doing this the Pontier house started to lose all the battles where the mercenary was, and their biggest problem was the fact that the mercenary always managed to be well located in the arena. I analyzed the situation better. Icaro remembers that in terms of military and economic power, the Pontier house has the advantage. He believes that the Pontier house should be the defenders in this battle, and in a circus where the defenders have the advantage over the attackers it would not make sense that the addition of a single superhuman would make such a difference in the battle. However, the thing that worries him the most is the fact that the head of the family is in bed because he ate poisoned food. Informs Joshua about the war and says that Reveille was very excited about the unilateral declaration of war with the Crombell family, and tells his father he simply disappeared into it. Aiden explains that the Crombell family was responsible for exterminating the Rubrica family completely, and now their objective is to start a war against the Pontier family. That being said, Aiden states that Marquez Crombell began to act in a very reckless and harmful way for the nation as a whole. In this, Joshua deduces that Emperor Marcos may be working behind the Marquis, and upon hearing this theory Aiden says that it makes sense, especially in the current moment. That being said, Aiden explains to Joshua that he is only telling him this to help him because if the Pontier house falls, the next target will be the Agnos family, and furthermore, he states that he already trusts Joshua. Therefore, he is not his enemy, but Aiden makes it clear that he only told him this so he can ask for a favor next, in case he wants the boy to take care of Miss Island. Meanwhile, Paladin Christian heads towards the ruined area and says that he was sent by Rubalt to investigate that place, but one of the guards tells him to leave. After all, that area is already under the supervision of the Avalon Empire, so Christian left the place and becomes suspicious. Royal Wizards and the Evil Tower are working together. Then he wonders about the relationship between the Lith that appeared and the Empire of Avalon. He follows his path and enters Ars Castle, and soon after Christian is attacked by a GOL variant that knocks him down to the floor below, and to the looking around he is surprised by several other monsters within the darkness, and he can only think that he is really screwed. And falling into that hell, he starts to defeat the undead and activates his lightning spear, throwing several of them away, but then he catches sight of one of the zombies exhaling mana and several others. They run up to Chris and he begins to activate his sacred sword Der Lindana, asking her to respond to his call, and then a wave of holy energy begins to appear, and he says that in the name of the god Hermes he will judge them, so he FCA his sword on the ground, activating the holy cross, and all the zombies around him begin to be affected by the holy light. And Christian begins to wonder how strong this lith would be for all the variant ghouls to be attracted to the radiant holy energy that he says. I was hoping to go there and take care of everything discreetly, but it seems like it will be impossible, so he starts activating his magical arts again and says that even if this ends up being very flashy he will need to take care of this as soon as possible, and then he starts praying to Lord Erms, asking him to awaken that our sacred find the source of evil. Then his magic starts scanning the entire place until he comes face to face with the being that looks back at him, and he starts asking what that person is doing there, and then a portal opens and several ribbons of mana come out that end up trapping Christian, and then something starts to rise in front of him. He asks if this person is trying to cause a continental war, and he says that this person even created a death knight, and then the knight appears face to face with him. In the meantime, Aiden is delivering a letter to a wizard, and the other wizards are taking care of a seal on it. Aiden says he is going to make a brief visit to Heb's castle and will return immediately, and he says that now that he has reported about the Order of Dead Voss to Guild Avalon will probably act soon, and the man says that even if this happened, a follower of Rubalt infiltrated in Castle R has been missing for 3 days, and Rubalt will certainly act soon too, so he asks him to make sure do everything he needs to do and that he comes back before things get complicated. And Aiden states that he knows that people are going to take over this country, so he will prevent him from doing something that won't cause problems, and he thinks to himself that he has to get out of there soon. The guild mercenary is already too much for him to handle, so his caravan simply leaves, and inside one of the carriages Isaline talks to Joshua that he didn't say anything, and the boy says he had nothing to say, so she asks if it is true because she still has some questions in mind, and she asks why he asked for an artifact that is still in development in exchange for protecting her, but he doesn't answer, and she states that Crombell placed a huge bounty on her head, causing many dangerous people to be after the girl, and she states that for what she's doing he's not asking a lot, but he says that after spending some time with Captain Aiden he thought it would be convenient to have that and nothing much, and she is impressed by his talk about it being convenient and starts to laugh, saying that he is funny, and she says that they can just give them one of these if he gives him time, and says that he will make sure he gets everything when this is all over. Then he asks her something. He asks her how Count Rebecca disappeared, and in that, the high spirits of girl goes downstairs and he apologizes for asking that like that and says that if it is difficult for her to talk she cannot talk about it, and she starts narrating saying that it happened suddenly. The family property was on fire and everyone including the knights and servants were in danger of dying. Then she remembers 5 years ago where someone screams for them to catch everyone and kill everyone, and so her father says he will block their path and tells them to run away. So the girl says she can't let your father alone, but Count Rebecca shouts at her telling her to just go quickly, and so she understands, and one of the servants starts pulling her saying that everyone is going to die, which the girl understands, and even though she cries she leaves saying see you soon to her father. Then the men who were behind them, they end up falling into the Rebecca trap, and she claims that her father sacrificed to buy time so they could escape, and all that was left was the half-destroyed property. And as time passed people started to forget, and she says she decided to go there to help the survivor, and that was when rumors that a lit had appeared started to spread through RE, so she needed to confirm with her own eyes what this lith would be. And Joshua gets serious for a while and says he can't say he understood everything, but he says he needs to say something to the girl, and maybe this is something she doesn't expect. And when he was going to talk about lith he feels a presence and gets scared by it, so he jumps out of the carriage and starts thinking that he was sure he felt that presence. Damn Kaiser's dog Velvel. And then Jor was lucky and puts the door down. Then Aiden starts to ask why he is acting on his own, but the boy just says he needs to confirm something and comes back to find him later, so he runs out, and after traveling a long distance he falls on top of a magic circle and realizes that that symbol was made not long ago, and he thinks to himself that he is sure he felt Velvel's presence, and he says that he can also see evidence of someone with a greater regnal time fighting for there, and he starts to bother because everything is taking away that rune from there. It's very normal, and in that his earrings notice something, and he notices an anti-magic field, and then he breaks what looks like a window made of mana and finds Christian hanging, and the only thing the boy can do is groan in pain, and Joshua states that he knew it was an illusion spell and asks if the boy is the owner of that rune, but he can barely say anything, and the protagonist, who is a door, keeps asking what the hell is going on, and the boy tells him to look back, but before he could do anything the undead knight was already behind Josa, almost hitting him, but as he kept asking so many stupid questions he ends up being hit and thrown away, but he manages to get up without much trouble and is surprised by the fact that he didn't feel the presence of that man behind him, so he starts to activate his mana, and he says he has never seen a death knight like that. And when he summons Lucia he hears her saying that he is hers, and then Lucia starts to mess with the boy's head, making him feel a lot pain, and the knight, as he isn't stupid or anything, ends up attacking the boy, seeing that he is weakened, but Joshua's eyes turn red and he manages to defend the knight's attack without too many problems, and Chris is shocked by that, asking what the hell it is that guy, and wonders how he is feeling both divine and demonic power coming from him at the same time. But when he turns his eyes to Joshua the boy has a totally crazy look on his face, and he says to the knight that he is his. It seems that it is no longer Joshua who is in control of his body, and he begins to scream that this is his prey, and he manages to hit the undead, causing damage that takes off his arm, and the dead man Vivo reacts to this by screaming in pain, and Lucia Barajosa starts to say that of course he understands because he will never be able to defeat him, so he tells the creature to stop resisting and just die, but the knight shouts at Joshua telling him not to play with him, and Lucia gives an excited look to hear this, and the knight does not give up, summoning a golden blade, and this certainly impresses Luke, who recognizes it as the wolf's fang blade. The wolf's howl, and already in another place in the imperial palace of Swallow a widespread slaughter occurs in that place, and the Prince Lucifer says that Emperor Verona is too weak because he has no right to be emperor, and all he can do is claim to the people that he will protect the peace, and Lucifer states that even the people know that it is a waste to stay imprisoned in this country. Tiny and the boy states that the people want the place to expand, but Verona asks him if he thinks this war would be for the good of the nation, and he states that the moment the war starts the fathers and mothers of this country will lose their children, and he asks if Lucifer really wants to watch the world burn to ashes, and the boy says he already knew they wouldn't agree, and he says that the emperor's brother Demero Belgrace who should be in his position because he would certainly agree with he and Verona. He remains silent when he hears this and asks how long he had been planning this coup d'etat, and he asks if it was since Duke Alp was sent to the interior, and he says that if the news spreads a war will start and he won't get what he wants, but Lucifer tells him to stay calm because the Prime Minister Gondar will take care of everything, and the Duke Altman will never receive news. After all, he is already dead, and Verona Regal has his eyes turned upside down, and Lucifer says that he deserves to be called wise because he understood how the flow of events worked, and even after the Emperor leaves this world Ganda will continue to be the first min of that place, and he says it's time for Verona to leave, but the Emperor says that Lucifer won't come out of this unscathed, so the boy just shits what is he talking about, and with that frown on his face he starts to pull out his sword asking if it's the same one. Then heads roll in that place, and returning to the state of Joshua Bara Lucia. The knight is on the ground with Lucia stuck in him, and at that he starts the regain your consciousness by asking how how and what happened to him, but Joshua says he doesn't know what happened to him to end up becoming a Death Knight, but one thing he is sure of: human souls, especially those of the masters who are beyond ordinary humans, cannot be forced to follow this path. Then he probably must have made this decision for himself, and the boy states that he doesn't know what regrets he has or why he decided to follow this path, but he asks if it's okay for him to follow with him, and in this the boy begins to recite the true name of the Death Knight, and then a memory arises of Raves is beating a knight, and it is because of this defeat he claims that as a result he lost his position as master and was forced to move to the interior, and he realizes only now that it was all an excuse to keep him as far away from Emperor Verona as possible, and conveniently this made him a good sacrifice to use all of this at the hands of Emperor Verona's brother, the first monarch he served then. Demaro Belgrease is looking down on him, and he asks if the man wants to have that much power, because that is the case he could have gained the strength that day and he would certainly be boy enough to do it as one of the 9 stars, but he says he doesn't have so much arrogance for the throne, but the world he's living in today is very boring, and he says that Lucifer will be the one who takes Verona's position. So he starts to remember the Archduke Lucifer, and so he martyrs himself because he was an idiot. He should have done everything could to continue on Emperor Verona's side, and he feels that this is frustrating and starts to wonder if he would really die like that. And then Demaro starts talking to Evergrande because he was planning to create a demonic beast, and that would be his best chance. After all, the soul of a knight full of rage and regret should be easy to give him, and Evergrande states that he will be the first to know once he is done, and he assures him that it will be interesting. And returning to the present, Joshua is looking at him, says that a Death Knight requires the body and soul of the best knights. It also turns out that it is a demonic beast that cannot be created without the agreement, and Joshua assures that they only gave him the means to make the agreement, calling this man the Wild King Duke Altma, and in this Duke starts asking to be killed because he made the wrong choice, and if he is not released now he will be forced to follow their orders, and that is why in order to stop dishonoring himself he wants him to kill him now. However, Joshua says he has an offer. Better, he says he will take control in place of whoever did this, and in return he asks the Duke to lend him his strength, and only in that case will he support his reason for becoming a Death Knight. So Joshua states that this is his proposal and how he will show respect to the Wild King Elisma, who used to reign over these lands, and at that monster starts laughing and says he knew he was interesting just like they said, and he says that anyone can say that these conditions only favor him, and that's why he would have to make another choice, and he says that instead of working as a slave to a skinny black man, it would be an honor to walk alongside one of the greatest geniuses on the continent, and so he asks Joshua, the best spearman on the continent, to do whatever he wants. So he asks if he accepts her offer and says that he will transfer control now, and then he calls Lucia and starts flooding that body with human, and from outside he tells the soldiers to stay alert because it is possible that more demons besides Lith are there, and he asks men not to forget, understand why they are there, and do everything possible to rescue the mercenary, and then they say they understand, but he wonders to himself what is going on because he felt an unbelievable amount of energy not long after Baron Joshua entered, and the only thing he can hope is that Joshua is okay. But then people from Rabalt start arriving and ask them to stop, saying that they are not welcome in Heb's castle and asking them to disperse immediately, and then Aiden asks who they are. They introduce themselves as the knights and clerics recently sent by the Rabald Empire and will be taking control over that castle now, so they order them to return from where they came, but Aiden tells Mondrian that his companion is inside the castle and they can't leave him behind, so in his thoughts he starts to think how Robalt's troops arrived so quickly, but Mondrian starts to say that it seems he is not aware of the damage caused through the Heb castle, and the more victims are inside the more demons they will have to face, and he states that his job is to stop them, so he hopes that they can end everything on good terms. But at this Aiden asks if he is threatening the Avalon Mercenaries Guild within the territory of Avalon. He still claims this is a strictly military provocation, but Damien says it looks like words won't work, so he says forget about the war between continents. He claims the entire world could be in danger, and in this they start to feel a violent mana coming from inside, and even without even knowing what it is they feel that something dangerous is there, so Damien asks them to prepare for battle and tells him to defeat all the demons that are coming. Then the energy only intensifies, and when someone puts their foot out he says that this energy is not common and this would not be an ordinary Lith, and he even thinks it could be a demon king. But Joshua arrives in good time asking if Aiden would still be waiting for he and everyone stay in shock that it is Baron Josh, and they ask what happened inside, and he just states that he managed to solve everything, but asks if those would be the clerics of Rabalt, and they ask why they are inside the territory of Avalon, but the cleric freaks out and shouts at him not to allow that demon to escape, and then he starts to go after Joshua, but Aiden defends him stating that that is Baron Joshua, a noble from the Avalon Empire, and would not be a demon, and just asks him to lower his sword, but Damien asks if he is not feeling the demonic energy that is coming from him, and there is no way it could be a human being, and he even asks if Aiden would be on his side, and Joshua thinks to himself that he had a bad feeling about it even more so when Lucia asked him take it easy on the demonic energy, and Lucia starts talking to him asking if he thinks it's easy because he just absorbed a Death Knight, and then he proposes that they show them what a Death Knight is capable of, and Joshua asks if Luke is crazy and asks also if he would be able to deal with the consequences, but someone asks the cleric to wait, and the girl who was in the middle of them starts taking off her cloak and asking if something is wrong, and then they ask the saint what the problem is, and she says that with that much demonic energy they should all have already been decimated, and if he really is Baron Joshua, fighting will only cause conflicts between nations. But the guy continues, saying that if that demon leaves there they won't be able to know what he can do, so he says he needs to stop it anyway, but she asks them to leave this choice to the goddess. Then she states that with the sacred artifact Tear of God from the Hermes temple they will find out if this person is really a demon or Baron Joshua Sanders, and then she asks him what he thinks and asks if he will accept the judgment of God's tear, but she starts talking telepathically to him, telling him to stay calm because she can deceive something as simple as God's tear, and she says that she will help him get out of this situation in security, and Joshua starts to ask why she is helping him and also asks what she wants from him, but she says that he is not indebted to her, but this while making a very suspicious face and saying that it is because he is very handsome and she's super your type bro, basically a completely distorted saint. And then Lucia starts to get excited, saying that he's never seen such a profane saint, and he says he can't take it anymore, and if Joshua doesn't do something he will do it, and Joshua says that don't need help. Then he drops Christian to the ground and everyone goes crazy about it, but the boy starts to exude a lot of holy energy, and the saint starts to wonder how the demonic energy turned into holy energy out of nowhere, and while she questions who the hell Joshua could be, Tear of God begins to react to him and leaves the saint's hand going directly into Joshua's hand, and he states that those who forgot their role and sank into their own greed do not deserve to use it, so she asks him to return the artifact because this is not the item he can use it, so he says that if she doesn't believe him he will show her here now, and so he starts to merge his sacred energy into that stone and everyone starts to go blind with the shine. And if you want, don't forget to leave that like and leave that comment to bring you more and more videos of this manhwa here on the channel, and I'll see you in the next video.